The wind howled across the Wyoming badlands like a banshee mourning the dead, kicking up dust that stung the eyes and choked the lungs. It was the summer of 1874, and the drought had turned the land into a graveyard of withered grass and bleached bones. Eliza Harlan walked with her head down, one arm around 7-year-old Caleb and the other around 5-year-old Ruth, their little legs stumbling over the cracked earth. 3 days without food had left the children silent, their cheeks sunken, their eyes too big for their faces. Eliza's own stomach twisted with a pain sharper than any knife, but she kept moving toward the faint glow of a lantern she had spotted from the ridge, an isolated ranch cabin that belonged to a man no one in the nearest town would claim to know. She had buried her husband, Josiah, 2 weeks earlier after fever took him in a single burning night. The homestead was mortgaged to a banker in Laramie who had already sent a rider to warn her the place would be seized by month's end. With no crop, no stock left alive, and no money, Eliza had only one thing left to bargain: her children. She would beg the stranger in that cabin to take them, feed them, raise them. She would walk away and let the wilderness finish what starvation had started. The thought tore her heart in two, but a mother's love sometimes looks like sacrifice. When she reached the rough-hewn door, she knocked once, weakly. It swung open almost immediately, and a tall man filled the frame, lantern light carving deep shadows across a face hardened by sun and solitude. His clothes were patched and faded, his boots cracked, his beard more gray than black. A Colt hung low on his hip, and his right hand rested near it without threat, only habit. His eyes, pale blue and piercing, took in the woman and the 2 scarecrow children in one sweep. "Ma'am," he said, voice gravelly from disuse, "you're a long way from anywhere." Eliza tried to speak, but her throat closed. She pushed the children forward a step. "Please, mister," she rasped. "Take my children. They're good. They'll work hard when they're stronger. Just, feed them. I can't anymore." Tears cut trails through the dust on her cheeks. "I'm begging you. Take them and let me go." The man stared as if she had struck him. For a long moment the only sound was the wind rattling the shutters. Then he stepped aside, holding the door wide. "Get in out of the cold," he said quietly. "All 3 of you." Eliza shook her head. "I ain't a skin for myself." "I heard what you asked," he cut in, not unkindly. "Now get inside before I change my mind about hospitality." She obeyed because her legs would no longer hold her up. The cabin was small, one room with a stone fireplace, a narrow bunk, a table, 2 chairs, and shelves of canned goods that looked like treasure. A pot of beans simmered on the hearth, and the smell hit the children so hard that Ruth began to cry without sound. The man, his name was Garrett Reed, ladled beans into tin bowls and set them in front of Caleb and Ruth. They fell on the food like starved animals. Eliza stood rigid, hands clenched at her sides, watching every bite as though it might be snatched away. Garrett poured coffee into a chipped mug and held it out to her. She didn't take it. "I meant what I said," she whispered. "Take the children. I'll leave at first light." Garrett leaned against the wall, arms folded. He studied her for a long minute, then spoke the words that turned her world upside down. "I'll take the children," he said, voice low and steady. "But I'll take you too." Eliza's breath stopped. Shock rooted her to the floor. She searched his face for mockery or menace and found neither, only a raw, unflinching resolve that frightened her more than hunger ever had. "Why?" she demanded, voice cracking. Garrett turned to stir the beans, buying time. "Because I know what it is to be alone with ghosts," he said at last. "And because no child should grow up believing his mother chose the prairie over him." The hook sank deep. Eliza's mind raced. Who was this man who lived so far from town that rumors barely reached him? Folks in Laramie called him a recluse, said he had come north after the war with nothing but the clothes on his back and a haunted look. Some whispered he had killed a man in Texas. Others claimed he had lost a family to Comanche raiders and could no longer bear the sight of people. Whatever the truth, he was offering her life when she had come prepared to trade hers away. That night the children slept on Garrett's bunk, bellies full for the first time in weeks. Eliza lay on a pallet of blankets by the fire, staring at the rafters. Every creak of the cabin made her hand slip toward the skinning knife in her boot. Trust did not come easy on the frontier, and a lone man taking in a widow and her young ones raised questions no decent woman could ignore. Dawn brought revelation and fresh terror. Garrett stepped outside to check his stock and returned with his face grim. "Riders on the ridge," he said. "3 of them. Watching the cabin." Eliza's heart slammed against her ribs. "Banker's men. Come for the homestead early?" Garrett shook his head. "Not banker's men. These carry rifles across their saddles and ride like they mean business." He loaded his Henry repeater with calm, practiced movements. "Stay inside. Bar the door if shots start." But Eliza would not cower. She took the old shotgun from its pegs above the mantel, checked the loads, and stood beside the window. The children huddled in the corner, wide-eyed. Minutes crawled by like hours. Then hoofbeats approached slow and deliberate. A voice called from outside. "Garrett Reed. We know you're in there. Come out peaceable and we'll only take what's owed." Garrett's jaw tightened. "What's owed to who, Slade?" The rider laughed, cold and ugly. "To the Riley brothers, that's who. Word is you still got the gold you stole off Buck Riley before you put him in the ground." Eliza felt the floor tilt beneath her. Gold. Murder. The whispers were true, and now they had come calling with guns. Garrett glanced at her, eyes asking if she would stand with him. She answered by cocking the shotgun. Something fierce and protective flared inside her chest. These men threatened the roof that had sheltered her children last night. They would not take it without a fight. The shooting started sudden and loud. Bullets splintered the doorframe. Garrett returned fire through the window, dropping one horse and sending its rider tumbling. Eliza fired the shotgun, the recoil bruising her shoulder, and saw another rider clutch his side and will away. The third, Slade, charged the door on foot, kicking it in with a roar. Garrett met him in the center of the room. The 2 men crashed together like maddened bulls. Fists smashed into flesh. Slade's knife flashed. Garrett twisted, taking the blade along his ribs instead of deep. Blood soaked his shirt, but he drove his elbow into Slade's throat and followed with the butt of his revolver. Slade dropped, gasping. Silence fell, broken only by the whimper of the children. Eliza stood over Slade with the shotgun aimed at his head. Her hands shook, but her voice did not. "Tell your friends," she said, "that Garrett Reed ain't alone anymore. Next time they come, they'll find more than one gun waiting." Slade spat blood and grinned. "You're harboring a murderer, lady. That makes you no better." Garrett hauled the man up by his collar and dragged him outside, tying him across his own saddle. The wounded rider had fled, the dead one lay where he fell. Garrett fired a shot into the air as warning, then watched until the 2 surviving horses disappeared over the ridge. When he came back inside, he was swaying. Eliza pressed a cloth to the knife wound along his ribs. It was long but not mortal. As she bound it, their eyes met. "You could have let them take me," he said quietly. "Saved yourself and the young uns a heap of trouble." "I considered it," she admitted, surprising herself with the honesty. "But you gave us beans when we had none. That buys a lot of loyalty out here." A faint smile touched his mouth. "Then we're square." But they were far from safe. Slade's parting words echoed, "More would come." Garrett confessed that night by firelight, voice low so the children would not hear. "During the war I rode with a guerrilla outfit in Missouri. After Appomattox we were hungry, desperate. We took a herd from a man named Buck Riley. He drew on me. I shot first. Maybe he meant only to scare us, maybe not. Either way, he died. I took the gold he carried, payment for the cattle he'd sold north. Been running from his kin ever since. Eliza listened without judgment. The West was built on hard choices and harder consequences. And the gold? She asked. He lifted a floorboard beneath the table. A small leather pouch clinked heavily, enough coin to buy a fresh start anywhere. Blood money, he called it. Never spent a dime. She stared at the glittering pile, then at the man who had chosen hunger over spending it. Something shifted inside her, a wall crumbling. Days turned to weeks. Garrett taught Caleb to rope and brand the few cattle he owned. Ruth followed Eliza as she worked the kitchen garden, coaxing stubborn soil to yield beans and squash. Rain finally came, soft and steady, turning the plains green almost overnight. But peace felt fragile, like thin ice over deep water. One evening riders appeared again, 5 this time, led by a man wearing a deputy's badge. Deputy Marshal Harlan Riley, brother to the dead buck. He rode bold to the porch and dismounted. Garrett Reed, I have a warrant for murder and theft. Come quiet. Garrett stepped out, hands visible. It was self-defense, Harlan. You know the stories. I know my brother's dead and you're alive with his gold. The marshal's eyes flicked to Eliza in the doorway. Ma'am, take your children and ride clear. This ain't your fight. But Eliza lifted the Henry repeater. It became my fight the night your men shot up this house. Shock rippled through the posse. A woman standing armed beside an outlaw was not something they expected. Marshal Riley's face darkened. You're choosing the wrong side, ma'am. Maybe, she answered. But I'm choosing. Standoff stretched taut. Wind whipped manis and hats. Then a new sound cut the air, hoofbeats from the east. Another group of riders crested the hill, 6 strong, led by an older man with a gray mustache and a weathered Bible in his saddlebag. Hold fire, the newcomer shouted. I'm Preacher Amos Tate, formerly captain in the Missouri Volunteers. I rode with Reed and Riley both that day. I saw what happened. The posse shifted uneasily. Preacher Tate dismounted and handed Marshal Riley a folded paper yellowed with age. Affidavit signed by 3 witnesses still living. Buck Riley drew first. Reed acted to save lives. The herd was payment for supplies the army never delivered. Legal or not, it wasn't murder. Riley read in silence, jaw working. At last he folded the paper and looked at Garrett. Law says I should take you anyway, he said. But justice says different. He turned to his men. We ride back to Laramie. Case closed. No one argued. They mounted and left without another word. When the dust settled, Garrett stood staring after them, disbelief on his face. Eliza lowered the rifle, legs suddenly weak. Preacher Tate tipped his hat to her. Ma'am, you've got sand. This man's lucky to have you. He glanced at Garrett. Don't waste the second chance, son. They rode away, leaving quiet in their wake. That night Garrett poured the gold onto the table. It's ours now, he said. Clean, or clean enough. Eliza touched the coins, then touched his hand. We'll buy more cattle. Build a real herd. Make this place something the children can inherit. Months rolled into years. The ranch grew. Caleb became a tall, quiet boy who could rope a steer before he was 12. Ruth turned into a fearless rider with laughter that carried across the greening plains. Garrett and Eliza married quietly one spring morning with only Preacher Tate and the children as witnesses. The gold bought land, good breeding stock, and a sturdy house with Real glass windows. But the West never truly tamed. Raiders struck one hard winter, driving off half the herd. Garrett and Eliza rode after them through snow and biting wind, tracking for 3 days until they recovered most of the cattle and left 2 outlaws face down in the drifts. Word spread, the Reed ranch was not easy pickings. Years later, when gray touched Eliza's hair and Garrett's beard had gone fully white, they sat on the wide porch watching grandchildren chase each other through the yard. Caleb ran the ranch now with his young wife. Ruth had married a sheriff over in Cheyenne. Eliza leaned against Garrett's shoulder. "Remember the night I asked you to take my children?" He chuckled softly. "How could I forget? You looked ready to fight the devil himself. And you said you'd take me too. Best decision I ever made." She smiled, eyes on the endless Wyoming sky. Funny how a starving widow begging at a stranger's door found everything she was afraid to hope for. Garrett squeezed her hand. And a poor rancher running from his past found the only thing worth staying for. The wind still blew across the plains, carrying echoes of gunshots and lost souls, but inside the circle of lamplight on that porch, there was only warmth, laughter, and the quiet certainty that some stories, born in desperation and forged in fire, end not in tragedy, but in grace.